Hello everyone, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy's daily current affairs analysis. Today we'll be discussing some important topics which are covered in different newspapers in detailed and in-depth manner. And the first topic with which we're going to start this session is about why is rupee falling and what are the implications on Indian economy because of the falling rupee. Now in fact this is a very widely covered news topic, so we'll be understanding the reasons for the fall of rupee. Now in fact this has been given in the Hindu newspaper, and from the syllabus point of view this could be very important for prelims and general studies main paper 3 as well. So let's understand why rupee has fallen. So if you look at this, the value of Indian rupee, now in fact it is a market oriented or market determined. Now in fact there is no specific target for a specified level or a band. And that's why, since it is a market determined, so market actually determines the value of Indian rupee. So that is the first thing. Second thing, rupee's fall is largely due to the global factors. So we can say that it is because of the external factors rather than the internal factors. For example, the currencies of several countries are under pressure nowadays because of the unpredictability, tariff wars, global trade wars. So all these factors can be considered as external factors, and these are the crucial factors for the fall of the global currencies including Indian rupee. However, the US dollar has been strengthening in recent months due to the uncertainty which is sparked by US President Trump's tariff policy. So this tariff policy of US President Donald Trump is, to some extent, it is also responsible for strengthening the dollar. Now strengthening dollar corresponds to, or as a consequence of strengthening dollar, it will lead to the fall of rupee as well. And in recent times, Indian currency rupee is also under pressure due to the narrowing interest rate differential between US and India. And apart from that, the foreign portfolio investment outflows of about $19.5 billion from India between October and January also contributed to the fall of rupee. And in fact, India's high goods trade deficit has also exerted pressure on Indian rupee. So therefore, mostly it is driven by the external factors, followed by the outflow of foreign portfolio investment and high goods trade deficit that India is having. All these factors have contributed to the fall of rupee in India. So by this you have understood basically what are the reasons for the fall of rupee. However, so let's go into this topic and let's understand what could be the other reasons, what are the implications on Indian economy, and how to address this issue. Right. So we have known that Indian rupee is falling. Now in fact, Indian rupee slipped below 90 rupees per US dollar. Right. So in fact, this 90 rupees per US dollar is one of its lowest to the US dollar. So therefore, this slipping or falling rupee has led to an intense public debate and even the political debate as well. However, now in fact, Indian rupee is market determined and it is fundamentally an economic issue, and this economic issue is driven by few factors like trade balances. So we export things to other countries, and we also import goods from different other countries. Now while exporting and importing, there might be a trade deficit or trade surplus. Both trade deficit and trade surplus influences the value of Indian currency. Secondly, capital flows. If we receive foreign portfolio investment, foreign direct investment, then that might strengthen Indian rupee. But if there are outflows of FDI and FPI, that also negatively affect the Indian rupee. And then investor sentiment, the policy responses from the government side. So all these factors together influence the fall of rupee or the value of Indian rupee. However, so the rupee's current fall can be understood in the context of both domestic fundamentals and even the global market conditions as well. So therefore, the external conditions as well as the domestic conditions together responsible for the fall of rupee. So let's understand structural and fundamental drivers of the depreciation of Indian currency. Now the first factor is a wide trade and current account deficits. Now in fact, what exactly is this trade deficit? Now with countries like China, we have a huge trade deficit, and in fact with Russia also we have a trade deficit. Now when we have this trade deficit with too many countries, it might lead to the current account deficit as well. So therefore, as of now, India's trade deficit has increased and import growth outpaces India's overall export growth. That means we have been importing goods from other countries at much higher rate rather than what we are exporting to other countries. So therefore, this has created a current account deficit as well. So this current account deficit means India requires more foreign currency to pay goods and services that we are importing into our country. However, this structural demand for dollar naturally exerts a downward pressure on the rupee as well. So this could be the first reason. And what is the second reason for the fall of rupee? Now, the second reason is decline in the foreign portfolio investments. Because we have understood the outflow of the foreign portfolio investments also results in fall of rupee, right? So therefore, there has been a phase of consistent foreign portfolio investment outflows, and these foreign portfolio investment outflows are majorly driven by rising equity valuations in India. So therefore, investors shifted their investments to a high return markets rather than India. This could be the first reason. And the second reason is global investors, they seek a better short-term return in the other economies due to the higher interest rates abroad. So whichever economy offers them high interest rates for their capital, they just shift their capital into those economies which are offering higher interest rates. But Indian economy per se is not offering the best interest rates for their capital, and because of these reasons, the foreign portfolio investment was pulled out of Indian economy. So therefore, the capital flight out of Indian economy has increased market demand for dollars, and that further weakened Indian rupee. And then we have to understand the sentiment shocks due to the uncertain tariff negotiations. US has imposed tariffs on India's goods. Now, India's exports to US have been declined because of these tariff pressures. However, there are expectations of a pending India-US tariff agreement. Initially, it was supported by positive market, right? So there was a positive market sentiment. There might be ease in the tariff from US on Indian goods. However, over a period of time, what has been happening is there has been a constant delay in this tariff relief or India-US tariff agreement. And that has resulted in this existing sentiment to weaken over a period of time. So therefore, this uncertainty has influenced some foreign portfolio investors to pull back their investments out of Indian economy, and they have taken the capital to those economies where they are getting higher interest rates in a short term. So therefore, this further increased pressure on Indian rupee. Now in this context, let's understand what role RBI can play. So RBI can intervene, but the intervention of the RBI is a very limited intervention, because RBI intervenes only to curb excess volatility in the exchange rate, not to defend a fixed exchange rate, because Indian rupee and its value is determined by the market. So therefore, RBI will have a limited intervention powers. So therefore, its limited intervention suggests that a depreciation of rupee remains within a comfort zone. And secondly, India's forex reserves covers 11 months of imports as noted by RBI governor. So therefore, there are no structural weaknesses as of now because we have adequate amount of foreign currency reserves. However, so does falling rupee signal economic weaknesses? This is what we have to understand. Not necessarily, because falling rupee does not necessarily indicate weak economy. So let's understand this how. Because India's GDP growth remains robust because we have been growing at 8.2% per annum. This is one of the highest GDP growth in the emerging economies. And apart from that, if you look at the inflation trends, inflation is also under control. Fiscal consolidation is also on track, and even the capital expenditure is also very strong and very good. So because of all these factors, we could say that the falling rupee or depreciation of rupee not necessarily affecting Indian economy in a bad way or in an effective way. So this fall is driven more by a sentiment and transient factors, and it is not a structural deterioration that we need to understand in this aspect, right? So let's understand what impact it could have on Indian economy. So potential benefits, for example, if rupee has been depreciating, so that can incentivize the exports. So therefore, exports become more and more competitive for Indian goods, right? So we can export more goods and gaining price advantage of around 4 to 5%. First thing. Second thing, service exports. So a major contributor to Indian economy. This can also see improved rupee realization. So imagine a case that earlier, if one US dollar equals to 70 rupees, right? So 1 US dollar is 70 rupees. For example, an exporter who exports things who got $10, so earlier he used to get 700 rupees for those $10, but now he is exporting things for the very same $10, he can now get 900 rupees. So therefore, don't you think that it incentivizes the exports and it increases the export competitiveness, including the service exports also? So therefore, the firms with global earnings may pass on higher profits through bonuses, boosting consumption domestically. However, what are the downsides to the depreciation of rupees? So let's understand the downsides of depreciation of rupees. Now, in fact, the imports become costlier for the Indian economy, right? So if we are importing anything, then we now have to pay a higher amount of money. So for example, there are certain sectors which are import dependent sectors. So those import dependent sectors would be affected because of in the fall in rupee value, and they need to pay a higher amount of money to import the same amount of goods like before. And then 5% depreciation could rise inflation by around 0.3 to 0.4%, though still manageable. And in fact, the volatile currency, it further complicates planning for importers and exporters as well. So these are the negative sides of fall in rupee. However, we could say that the fall in rupee would not affect the Indian economy in a significant way. So this fall in Indian rupee can be manageable in the short term and in the long term as well. So therefore, the fall in rupee below 90 is not a cause for alarm. While short-term pressures, market sentiments are driving depreciation, especially the external factors rather than the domestic factors. However, one optimistic thing here is Indian economic fundamentals are strong as of now. So as long as volatility is contained, the rupee's movement reflects natural market adjustments rather than a structural crisis. So this factor that we have to understand here. And next, very important topic is about Gaganyaan. So there is a very high probability of this might be asked in mains examination as well as prelims examination. Now within Gaganyaan, a very important component is human rating. let's understand what is human rating and why human rating matters in India's preparedness to Gaganyaan. Let's first understand Gaganyaan mission. So Gaganyaan mission, India's first manned space mission. Right, so through Gaganyaan mission, 3 astronauts would be sent to the low Earth orbit for 3 days. This project was first approved by Prime Minister Narendra Modi on August 15, 2018. So therefore, this Gaganyaan mission planned to send 3 members of crew to the low Earth orbit for at least 7 days. Right, so in fact it is expected that either in 2026 or 2027, so Gaganyaan mission might be launched. And in fact, so ISRO would be using the launch vehicle GSLV Mark III for this project. So GSLV Mark III is also known as the biggest launch vehicle so far ISRO has. Now in fact, it could be one of the cheapest manned space flights in the world, with an estimated cost of not more than 10,000 crore rupees. However, so India plans to call astronauts as Vyomonauts. So Vyomonauts, Vyom means in Sanskrit space. So therefore, in India, we'll be calling them as Vyomonauts instead of astronauts. So if India is successful in sending Vyomonauts into the low Earth orbit or space, India will become the 4th country to successfully send human beings into the space after US, Russia, China. And the other thing is that the space agency hopes to launch the first mission within 40 months from the date of approval. However, it has been deferred after some time, and it is expected that the late 2026 or early 2027 Gaganyaan mission would be launched. Right, now let's understand some more details with respect to Gaganyaan mission and human rating of ISRO's launch vehicle Mark III, which is also called as LVM3. LVM3 is a launch vehicle Mark III. Right, so as we have already discussed that Gaganyaan represents India's first human spaceflight program. Now this first human spaceflight program aimed at sending 3 astronauts who are called as Vyomonauts into the low Earth orbit in an indigenously developed human rated launch vehicle. Right, so in fact India is very close to launch this Gaganyaan mission, and a human rating, which is a rigorous process to ensure astronaut safety, has become a central pillar of this mission. So we'll be also understanding what exactly is a human rated launch vehicle, so in detailed and in-depth manner as well. So let's understand this. Right, so what is a human rating? Now human rating actually refers to engineering and certification process, and in this engineering and certification process, so there is adequate safety systems or the space system which is safe or secure for the humans. Right, so therefore it is an engineering and certification process, and that ensures the space systems are safe and secure for the human beings, and therefore it establishes an acceptable level of risk, often quantified. However, so as per NASA standards, the acceptable risk is 0.2% chance of catastrophic failure, so causing crew loss during ascent or descent. Right, so let's understand what exactly this human rated systems incorporate. So since it is India's first mission, India needs to be very careful. So India has to work on all these safety systems to ensure the safety of the crew. Right, so human rated systems incorporate the following things. For example, the redundant critical systems. So the redundant critical systems include a triple, quadruple redundant flight computers. Secondly, abort capability of this vehicle. So throughout the ascent, so they will have this abort capabilities if anything is wrong with this launch vehicle, and for that ISRO's crew escape system is already in place, and environmental control and life support system inside the crew module, which is also a very important, and then false tolerance to signal point failures. And apart from that, the extensive test will verify, document, cycles far beyond the expandable cargo rockets. So therefore, the human rated systems incorporate all these above mentioned components, and therefore these components will significantly reduce the tolerance, the risk which is associated with these launch vehicles to the humanauts or the astronauts when we are launching or ascent or descent phases. Now, why achieving a human rating is challenging? So we'll understand why it is challenging. Now, in fact, achieving orbit is an inherently hostile endeavor, and therefore rockets must accelerate to around 28,000 km per hour in just 8 to 10 minutes. It is not easy, so that too in a hostile environment. And secondly, they have to withstand the vibration and structural loads and pass through a maximum dynamic pressure zones as well. And because of all these reasons, achieving a human rating is not exactly easy. However, so in contrast, the commercial aircraft cruise gently at less than 1000 km per hour. So therefore, they can actually tolerate engine failures and rely on vast safety margins as well. However, so even the most reliable launch vehicle achieve 98 to 99.5% success compared to a one fatal accident per 10 to 20 million flights in aviation. Right. So in this context, human rated launch vehicles worldwide, let's understand what are all other countries which have a human rated launch vehicles. So therefore, as of now, only few operational vehicles are currently human rated. One is Russia's Soyuz 2. It has 98% success rate, and more than 150 crewed missions have been launched into the space, the first thing. The second thing, China's Long March 2F. 16 successful missions so far since 2003, and a minor anomaly that has been occurred in Shenzhou 20. And then SpaceX's Falcon 9 plus Crew Dragon. So it has 100% success across 20 human missions. So these are the human rated launch vehicles around the world. And apart from that, NASA's Atlas V space launch systems. So they are progressing through the certification. So these are a human rated launch vehicles worldwide, and this could be very important for the prelims examination. Right. So let's understand the human rating of launch vehicle Mark 3 for Gaganyaan. So this LVM-3 is most powerful and most reliable rocket with the ISRO, and it is most reliable and most powerful and most secure also as a human rating launch vehicle. So once it is certified, it will be called as a human rated launch vehicle Mark 3 or HLVM-3. So let's understand the key upgrades for human rating in this launch vehicle Mark 3. So for that, ISRO has introduced a strengthened engines and subsystems, and a backup and a redundant safety systems, high reliability architecture within the launch system, extensive ground and flight testing, and then the crew escape system, which is capable of rapidly pulling the crew module away during the launch anomalies to secure the crew and ensure the safety of crew. However, the launch vehicle Mark 3 had already gone through 7 consecutive successful missions, including Chandrayaan 3. So therefore, this could be an ideal for launching Gaganyaan mission. Let's understand the strategic significance of this Gaganyaan mission and launch vehicle Mark 3. So in fact, with all propulsion systems, ES-200 boosters, Vikas engines and C-25 cryogenic stage, so they are all indigenously aligning with Atmanirbhar Bharat goals and enhancing the strategic excuse me, enhancing strategic autonomy in human spaceflight. So this is the strategic significance. However, we can hope that the Gaganyaan mission would be successful, right? So with all systems which are in place to ensure the safety and security of the crew members. Now let's understand another very important topic, which is about air pollution problem in India and how air pollution might threaten the health of the public. So this is also a very important topic because Indian cities are particularly facing the challenge of air pollution, every year, particularly during the winter season. So what exactly are the causes of air pollution? Now there are some general causes of air pollution in cities like Delhi. So industrial emissions, vehicular emissions, and burning of the landfill sites, and stubble burning, and construction dust. So these are all the most contributing factors to the air pollution. So apart from that, the household cleaning, which includes volatile organic compounds, agriculture ammonia pollution, construction dust, which releases particulate matter, nitrous oxides, shipping and other transportation, which also releases nitrous oxide, and industrial processes, which releases particulate matter, sulfur oxide, and even nitrous oxide, road transportation system, which also releases volatile organic compounds, sulfur dioxide, energy generation, particularly the thermal power plants, which also releases nitrous oxide, sulfur oxides, and domestic solid fuel consumption, and even the open burning of the landfill site, stubble burning. So all these factors causes excessive levels of air pollution in India, right? So let's understand air pollution as a problem in India and a deepening public health emergency. So one thing that we should understand about air pollution is a persistent public health issue in India. So particularly during the winter season, all across Indian cities, we could experience high levels of pollution. However, the higher levels of pollution in Indian cities, particularly densely populated cities, may emerge as a public health issue. Now, in this context, it affects every demographic group, whether it is children, young age, or old age. So therefore, irrespective of age group, irrespective of demographic group, it affects every individual and it harms multiple organ systems. And it also significantly reduces the life expectancy of the people across the country. So therefore, India has been going through rapid urbanization. So along with this rapid urbanization, there is poor planning, ineffective regulation, and there are some structural emission sources. So all these factors have been entrenched India's air quality challenge. Right. Now, the state of global air 2024. The state of global air 2024 has revealed that India is the second largest risk factor so air pollution is the second largest risk factor in terms of deaths in 2021, and countries in South Asia and Africa face the highest burden of disease because of air pollution, right? So in fact, you could see here the global risk factors for the deaths. The first factor is high blood pressure, and the second factor is air pollution. Third factor is tobacco, poor diet, and high fasting plasma glucose, right? So therefore, air pollution is the second largest risk factor around the world, right? So there are around 8.1 million total deaths due to air pollution in 2021. 58% deaths from the ambient particulate matter 2.5, and 38% of the deaths from household air pollution, and 6% death from the ozone layer. So therefore, the air pollution is responsible for 30% of deaths from the lower respiratory infections, 28% deaths from ischemic heart disease, and 48% deaths from the chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Right, so therefore it is true that air pollution is the one of the worst causes of health problems in India and around the world as well. So let's understand the organ specific issues which are because of the air pollution. So the cardiovascular damage. Now in fact there are pollutants like particulate matter 2.5 and particulate matter 10. Now in fact the particulate matter 2.5, that can penetrate deep into the bloodstream, triggering a systematic inflammation, and in fact Indian studies have shown that the annual mortality rate has increased to 8% for every 10 microgram cubic meter increase in the long-term particulate matter 2.5 exposure. Secondly, higher incidence of hypertension and atherosclerosis, arthritis, arrhythmias, and ischemic stroke is because of the air pollution. Secondly, it may also cause respiratory illness as well. How it causes respiratory illness? Because nearly 6% of Indian children, they actually suffer from asthma. So asthma is mainly because of the respiratory issues in lungs, and even air pollution further enhances the problem of asthma among the people. So a mere 10 microgram per cubic meter rise in particulate matter 2.5, it may cause around 20 to 40% spike in pediatric emergency visits, so as per the AIMS. However, children who are living in the polluted zones, so they have shown the reduced lung capacity of 10 to 15%. And in fact, it may also cause neurological damage among different age groups as well. Why? Because the particulate matter 2.5 can easily cross the blood-brain barrier, and therefore it worsens the cognitive development among children. And in fact, the international evidence links every 10 microgram per cubic meter increase in exposure to a 35 to 49% higher risk of dementia among the people. So let's understand the maternal and neonatal harm caused by the air pollution. So with this maternal and neonatal harm, high exposure, it would further increases the risks of preterm birth, low birth weight, and even neonatal mortality as well. So therefore, this factor has been disproportionately affecting the poor communities, and these poor communities very often live very close to industrial clusters, roads. However, there are some structural drivers of pollution. Let's understand the structural drivers. For example, the public debate often focuses on stubble burning, which is practiced in states like Rajasthan, UP, Punjab, Haryana, or fireworks. So therefore the public debate mostly focuses on these issues. But year-round sources, they dominate the problem of air pollution. They include industrial emissions, vehicular emissions, construction and demolition dust, informal waste burning, and household biomass use, and even the burning of landfill sites. So all these factors are the major factors which causes air pollution throughout the year. However, the seasonal events like winter season, increasing levels of pollution, they just intensify the already hazardous baseline. Right, so you can also go through the impact of air pollution. It will have economic impact, it will have impact on the environment, it will also impact the climate change, human health, and even the urban heat island effect is also because of, to some extent, air pollutants. However, there are certain policy gaps which are existing and reforms are needed. In Delhi, National Clean Air Program has been launched. Right, so National Clean Air Program has been launched, has improved monitoring, but this has suffered from the modest targets and weak enforcements all across the country. Now, not in Delhi, Commission for Air Quality Management, this is a statutory body. This is a statutory establishment to manage air pollution in Delhi. However, throughout India, National Clean Air Program has been launched. However, it has been suffering with twin problem. So one is poor enforcement, and the second problem is the modest targets. Poor enforcement along with the modest targets that it has set. However, what should be the way forward? The way forward should be a health-centered and a multi-sectoral strategy. And this multi-sectoral health-centered strategy should focus on these dimensions. One is transport transformation. So for example, electrification, promotion of electric vehicles, low emission zones, and even congestion pricing. Secondly, industrial control as well. For that, there should be a strict enforcement and shift away from the coal-based operations, and construction regulation is also very important, right? So there should be certain regulation, and for that dust suppression, mechanized sweeping needs to be done to control the dust and dust pollution. Waste management reforms. So waste management reform should involve segregation, biomethanation, and even elimination of open burning of these landfill sites, and integrate air pollution management with the health system management. So therefore that will result in real-time advisories, school lung function testing, and COPD, and even cognitive screening. So all these measures have to be taken to reduce the worst effect of air pollution on human health. So that's all for today, and thank you so much.